My daughter sold my house and truck while I sat in a clinic, proven by a call log at 11:42 a.m. Her follow-up text bragged, "We sent your share with a $62,417 deposit screenshot." I felt the chair's vinyl stick to my legs and my hands went cold. You know that hollow feeling when someone treats you like paperwork? She didn't know about the envelope in my dresser. She didn't know the deeds inside it. She didn't know I keep receipts. 2 weeks earlier was a different world. Let me back up. Before all of this, my name is Susan Miller, and I'm from Tampa, Florida. I'm in my early 60s, a widow, and I thought I knew my own kid. I was sitting in a green plastic chair at a clinic off Dale Mabry, waiting for my blood pressure check, when my phone buzzed. It was my daughter, Jennifer Garcia. I remember glancing at the clock because it was almost noon, and she never called at lunchtime. She didn't say hello. She said they were leaving for Europe the next morning. Business opportunity. Quick. Necessary. Then she said the sentence that still rings in my ears. She'd already sold my beach house and my truck. Needed cash. Hung up. That was it. Wrong move. I stared at the floor tiles because if I looked at anyone's face, I was going to lose it. My phone lit up again. A bank alert. A deposit labeled your 30%, 62,000 and change. I could see the little thumbnail of the transfer, crisp as day. You don't forget a number like that when it's attached to your life. If you're wondering how that feels, having your own child liquidate your memories, it's like getting shoved out of your body. You're there, but you're not. And then something odd happens. The tears stop. Your jaw tightens. You breathe. Game on. Here's the thing. 2 weeks earlier, my husband, Robert Miller, was alive. We were standing in our kitchen, coffee on, toast popping, talking about nothing important. He kissed my forehead, grabbed his keys, and said he'd be back by lunch. He never was. A heart attack took him at breakfast. No warning, no drama. Just gone. The quiet after that kind of loss is loud. You keep routines because they're all you've got. Jennifer showed up every day after that. Groceries, appointments, paperwork. She kept saying, "I'll handle it, Mom." I let her. Grief makes you soft. Grief makes you sign where someone points. Looking back, that's exactly what she wanted. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and bad coffee. The nurse called my name. Blood pressure was fine. "You're healthy," she said. I nodded like I heard her, but my head was already home, already opening a drawer, because there was an envelope. Robert had handed it to me months before he died. Manila, plain, my name written in his blocky handwriting. He told me to put it in my dresser and not open it unless I had to. I asked him what had to meant. He smiled and said I'd know. I knew. I rode the bus back across Tampa watching traffic crawl on Kennedy, watching people live normal lives, and I didn't cry once. At home, I went straight to the bedroom, slid open the bottom drawer, and there it was. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Inside was a letter and a stack of documents. Deeds, bank statements, share certificates. The letter was first. Robert's words were steady and kind. He wrote that he loved me, that he planned for storms, that everything was mine. Not some of it, all of it. He planned beyond the grave. The document spread across my kitchen table like a map. Properties I didn't know existed. A small motel up the coast. A condo downtown. And a 20-story apartment building with a familiar address, the building my daughter lived in. My name was on the ownership line through Robert's company. Mine. She lived in my building. Big mistake. I sat there a long time, reading, stacking, rereading. The quiet had weight. Then my phone rang again. Jennifer's name. I answered calm, because calm is a weapon. She told me they'd deposited my share and asked if I'd seen it. I said yes. She said 30% was fair because they did the work. I asked when they were leaving. She said tomorrow morning. I wished her a safe trip. You think I should have told her right then, don't you? Be honest, would you have blown it up immediately or stayed quiet? Comment below. After we hung up, I logged into my bank and zoomed in on the deposit. The sale prices were low. Too fast. Too clean. I took screenshots. Date, time, amount. I emailed them to myself. Receipts matter. That night, I stood at the front window and watched a car load suitcases. Jennifer and her husband, Michael Garcia, didn't look back. Not once. The door slammed. The engine revved. Gone. I was done asking questions. The next morning, I called David Peterson, an estate attorney downtown who'd helped a neighbor years back. I told his assistant I needed an urgent consult about my husband's documents. An hour later, I was in a quiet office with marble floors and a man who read fast. He verified the paperwork. Legit. Clean. He checked county records and looked up the beach house sale. Illegal without my signature. Same with the truck. He leaned back and said we could unwind it. Not loud. Not messy. Legal. I told him I didn't want to press charges. Not yet. I wanted everything put back the way it belonged. Quietly. He nodded, a little surprised, but he did his job. Control isn't loud. Before I left, I asked him one more thing. I slid the apartment building deed across the desk and asked who owned it. He smiled thin and said, "You do." She sold what wasn't hers. On the drive home, the radio talked about traffic on I-275. I turned it off. My phone buzzed with a neighbor text Linda Johnson asking if everything was okay since Jennifer left so suddenly. I typed back a thank you and said I was fine. Pity is a costume. At home, I put the documents back in the envelope and locked them in a firebox. I taped the screenshots to the inside lid. I wrote dates on a yellow pad. I set reminders. I breathed. I wasn't powerless. I was patient. Here's what she didn't know yet. The sale would be reversed, the truck would come back, and the building she slept in answered to me. She thought she'd cashed out and disappeared. She thought I'd be scrambling. Not today. I sat at the kitchen table as the sun went down over Tampa and planned the order. Timing matters. People make mistakes when they think they've won. And if you're wondering whether I was angry, yes. But anger without direction is just noise. I chose direction. Cut to black. Stay with me, you're going to want to see how this lands. I kept my face neutral and my mouth shut, and you need to understand why. If I'd screamed, I would have tipped my hand. And I wasn't about to do that. Some people say playing broke is dishonest. I say it's survival. Not anymore. The morning after I met with David Peterson, my life split into two tracks. On one track, I was the sad widow in Tampa who got left behind when her daughter ran off to Europe. On the other track, I was walking into the county records office with a folder of deeds and a list of questions that could ruin my daughter's life if I said them out loud. And I didn't say them out loud. I saved them. David called me around 8:10 a.m. and told me he'd already pulled the recorded deed from the county clerk system for the beach house sale. He emailed me a PDF with a file stamp, instrument number, and the buyer's name. It looked official because it was official. It also looked wrong because it was wrong. My name was on the paperwork, but the signature wasn't mine. I printed it anyway. 2 copies. One for the file box, one for my hands. The craziest part is how fast people accept a lie when it's typed in neat font. I didn't go anywhere fancy that day. I went to Target off Dale Mabry and wandered like I needed shampoo because I didn't want to sit in my house and spiral. I kept my phone in my cart like it weighed 50 pounds. Every few aisles, I'd check my bank app again just to make sure that 30% share deposit was still there, like it might vanish if I blinked. $62,000 doesn't feel like money when it's stained. Back in the parking lot, I sat in my car and scrolled my call log. There was Jennifer's call at 11:42 a.m. from the clinic. I took another screenshot and put it in a folder labeled Receipts on my phone. I emailed it to myself again. Then I forwarded it to David, just in case. I wasn't born yesterday. That afternoon, my neighbor across the street asterisk asterisk Carol Thompson asterisk asterisk caught me as I was dragging my trash can to the curb. Carol is the kind of woman who knows what time your Amazon packages arrive and what you paid for your roof. She tilted her head and did that soft voice people use when they think you're fragile. Carol said, "Honey, are you okay? I haven't seen Jennifer in days." I gave her the version of me she expected. I sighed. I shrugged. I said Jennifer was traveling and I was doing fine. Carol's eyes flicked to my driveway, like she expected my truck to be there. That truck was Robert to me. Grease under the nails, sun-faded steering wheel, his coffee cup in the console. It had his smell in it, and my daughter sold it like it was an old blender. They sold memories for cash. Carol offered to bring over chicken soup. I thanked her, because it was kinder to accept than to argue, and because I needed her to keep thinking I was alone and helpless. When she walked away, she pulled out her phone. Of course she did. Pity is a costume. That night, David sent another email with a subject line that made my stomach go hot. Buyer refund initiated. Deed challenge prepared. He wrote that his office had contacted the title company involved in the beach house sale and flagged the transaction as unauthorized. He said they were moving fast because timing matters with real estate, and because the longer you wait, the more people can pretend they didn't know. He also wrote one sentence I read 3 times. Do not contact your daughter yet. Good. We agreed on something. The next day, David had me meet him downtown in his office again. I wore a plain navy dress and my oldest shoes. I didn't want to look like someone with options. I wanted to look like someone who needed help. It's a weird thing, playing small when you're furious, but it gets you more information. In his conference room, he slid a stack of papers toward me, county records, sale documents, and a timeline he'd typed up with dates and names. He pointed to the beach house sale price first, and my jaw tightened because they'd practically given it away. Then he pointed to the signature. David said, "This isn't consistent with your other signatures we have on file." Even. That was his polite attorney way of saying, "This looks forged." I asked him how someone could sell property without me physically showing up. David didn't sugarcoat it. He said there are a couple ways people try. One is identity fraud with a forged signature and a fake notarization. Another is power of attorney. I didn't like the way he said that last part. The phrase felt too familiar, like a memory I didn't want to touch. David asked if I'd signed anything right after Robert died, anything that gave Jennifer permission to help with accounts or vehicles or paperwork. I sat very still, staring at a framed photo of a sailboat on his office wall, because suddenly I could see my own kitchen table from months ago, Jennifer sliding papers toward me, Jennifer holding a pen out like it was nothing, Jennifer saying, "This is just so I can help you." My hands started shaking, and I shoved them under the table. David said he could pull any recorded power of attorney documents if one had been filed, and he would, immediately. I left his office and didn't drive straight home. I pulled into the Starbucks on Kennedy, got an iced coffee I didn't even want, and sat in the corner with my phone turned face down. I watched people laugh and type and live. My chest felt tight and loud. You know that feeling when you realize your whole support system was a setup? I didn't call Jennifer. Not once. That was the hardest part, holding my tongue, when my pride wanted blood. But pride doesn't get you deeds back. Proof does. 2 days later, David texted me to meet him again, not in his office, at the beach house. He didn't explain in the text. He just wrote, "Bring your ID, wear sunglasses, stay calm." So I did. I took the bus out toward the coast, because I didn't want any neighbor seeing me drive off like I had some secret mission. I sat near the back with a tote bag and my folder of printouts. The bus smelled like sunscreen and stale air conditioning. Every stop felt too slow. When I got off, the air tasted like salt and hot pavement. The beach house wasn't some mansion. It was our place. The one Robert bought before prices went insane. The one where we grilled burgers on the back patio and watched storms roll in. The one Jennifer sold like it was spare change. I stood across the street for a full minute before I walked up, Like I needed to make sure it was real. The porch still had our old wind chime, the same chipped turtle planter by the steps. And then I saw strangers through the window. David pulled up a few minutes later and parked down the block. He didn't walk with me like we were together. He stayed a half step behind, like I was just some older lady looking at her old house. Because that's exactly what we needed the neighbors to believe, if anyone was watching. A couple came outside, mid-40s maybe, tan, flip-flops, carrying a Lowe's bag, like they were in the middle of fixing something. The woman's face changed when she saw me. Confusion first, then discomfort, like she suddenly realized she'd stepped into a mess. David introduced himself as my attorney. The man's eyebrows went up at the word attorney. That's when people get honest, fast. The woman said, "We were told you were very sick." I didn't blink. I didn't react. I just asked, "Who told you that?" She said Jennifer did, or the realtor did. She wasn't sure which, because Jennifer had been the one handling everything. The woman said Jennifer talked about me like I was already halfway gone, like signing things for me was some favor. The man added, "We were told you couldn't travel, couldn't come out here. That's why they did everything electronically." And my throat went tight. Not with tears, with something colder. She weaponized my vulnerability. David asked if they had any messages or emails from Jennifer. The woman hesitated, then pulled her phone out. She scrolled and showed us a text thread. I didn't touch her phone, but I read what I could from where I stood. It was Jennifer's number, Jennifer's tone, the same breezy confidence she used on me. One message said, "Mom's health is fragile. We need to close this fast." End quote. Another said, "She doesn't need the stress. I have POA." That last line hit like a slap. I looked at David, and his face tightened like he'd expected that word to show up. He asked the woman to screenshot the messages and email them to his office. She did, right there on the porch. She didn't argue. That's what happens when you realize you got played, too. The woman kept talking, nervous now, like she wanted to convince herself she wasn't the villain. She said they paid in full and already wired money to the title company. She said the realtor told them it was clean. She said she felt sick about it. I almost laughed. Sick was my daughter's favorite word that week. David told them the sale was being challenged and likely voided. He said they'd be refunded, but they needed to cooperate. The man's shoulders dropped like he'd been carrying a secret worry since closing day. He nodded. The woman's eyes got shiny. Then she asked me, "Is your daughter okay?" The nerve. I said, "She's fine. She just thought I was easy." Some people would have screamed at that couple. I didn't. They were collateral damage. And I was collecting something more valuable than rage testimony. On the walk back to the curb, David kept his voice low. He said, "That text about POA matters. A lot." I asked him if we could get those messages officially. He said yes. He said he'd draft an affidavit and have them sign it. He said the title company was already nervous because once fraud gets mentioned, everyone gets scared. Good. In the bus ride back, I stared out the window and watched palm trees blur past like a movie. My phone buzzed twice. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. Voicemail. I waited until I was home to listen. It was Jennifer. Sweet voice. Fake concern. She said she'd heard something weird about the beach house and asked if I'd been contacted. She said not to stress. She said she'd handle it. Cut the crap. I didn't call her back. I took a screenshot of the voicemail screen with the timestamp and saved it. Then I forwarded the voicemail audio file to David. If Jennifer wanted to put herself on record, I was happy to let her. That evening, Carol Thompson wandered over with a casserole dish like she was delivering charity. She asked how I was holding up. She asked if Jennifer had checked in. She asked if I needed help with errands. I let her talk. I nodded at the right times. And I acted tired. That's the thing about being underestimated. It's free cover. Carol said, "You poor thing. I can't imagine being alone." I smiled and said, "I'm managing." I was managing all right. I was building a case. 2 mornings later, David called me early. His tone was sharper than usual. He said, "Susan, we found a recorded power of attorney document." My grip tightened on the phone. He told me the filing date. It was 2 weeks after Robert died. He told me it listed Jennifer Garcia as my agent. And then he read me the notary information. Name, commission number, Tampa, address. He said, "Do you remember signing this?" I remembered signing something. I remembered Jennifer pushing papers toward me. I remembered crying so hard I couldn't see. I remembered trusting her because she was my kid and I was barely functioning. But I didn't remember this. I asked David to email me the document. He did, within minutes. I opened it on my phone, right there in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Robert died. The paper had that formal language that always sounds like it's trying to hide something. It said I granted Jennifer authority over financial matters, property transactions, vehicles, everything. Everything. There was my name typed. There was my signature. There was a notary stamp. And there was a problem. The signature wasn't mine. It was close enough to fool a busy clerk, but it wasn't how I sign. My S always loops. My last name slants. That signature looked like someone had practiced in the margin. I felt heat crawl up my neck. My ears rang. This wasn't helping. This was theft with stationery. David said he'd already started the process to challenge the POA. He said we could request the notary log, the identification record, and any video if the notary had cameras. He said we could also compare it to verified signatures from my bank, my driver's license, my old mortgage documents. Paper beats excuses. I asked him about the truck. If the POA was used to sell it, could we unwind that too? David said likely, yes. Vehicles have their own paperwork trail through the DMV and title transfers. He said the dealership or buyer might have records. He also said something that made my stomach drop in a different way. He said, "This could expose your daughter to criminal charges." I didn't answer right away. Because here's the messy truth. I wanted consequences. I didn't want my only child in handcuffs. Those two feelings can live in the same chest, and it's not pretty. Some people will tell you, I should protect my daughter no matter what. Others will say she deserves everything coming. And I'll tell you this. I wasn't going to protect her from the consequences of what she chose. I was only deciding how hard the floor needed to be. I told David, "Keep moving quietly." He asked if I was sure. I said yes. I said get my property back first. Then we'll talk about punishment. He didn't argue. He just said he'd update me when the title company confirmed the refund and when his office had the buyer's sworn statement. After I got off the phone, I did something I hadn't done since Robert died. I opened Robert's firebox and pulled out the envelope again. Not because I needed to reread it, because I needed to remind myself what Jennifer didn't know. She thought she was robbing a widow. She didn't understand she was robbing someone with leverage, and leverage changes everything. I spent the next few days doing things that looked normal to anyone watching. I went to Walmart on Gun Highway. I got gas. I waved at Carol. I paid my bills, like a boring old woman whose world got smaller. Underneath that, I was gathering proof like a person building a wall. David emailed me a confirmation from the title company. Refund processing started for the buyers, and the deed reversal paperwork would be recorded as soon as the county processed it. He attached a draft notice stating the sale was void due to unauthorized execution. He also sent a separate file labeled Corporate Ownership Summary. That one was for the apartment building. I opened it standing in my hallway because I couldn't sit down. It listed the company Robert used to hold the property. It listed the current registered agent. And it showed that after Robert's death, ownership transferred to me, which meant Jennifer wasn't just living in that building. She was living in a building she believed she owned by default because she paid rent and wore expensive shoes. She didn't own the air in her own living room. I walked into my bedroom and shut the door like I was containing something dangerous. Then I called David and asked him one question. Can I take control of building management without her knowing yet? David said yes. He said it would take steps, paperwork, management changes, bank account access, but yes. I leaned against my dresser and stared at that same drawer where Robert's envelope had waited. I thought about Jennifer's voice at the clinic, so casual, so final. I thought about her hanging up on me like I was a telemarketer. She hung up like I was nothing. I wasn't nothing. I was the owner. That weekend, Carol cornered me at my mailbox and said she'd seen Jennifer's Facebook post, something about finally taking mom on an adventure with a photo of an airport coffee and a passport cover. Carol said it was sweet. Sweet. My daughter sold my house and then posted airport coffee like she was a hero. I smiled at Carol and said, "Isn't that something?" Then I went inside and pulled up Jennifer's page. She'd blocked me from seeing most of it, but not all. There were comments from her friends saying she was brave, that she deserved a break, that she was such a good daughter for handling so much after her dad died. That's the kind of praise that makes me want to flip tables. Instead, I took screenshots. David called me Monday morning with another update. The buyers had agreed to sign an affidavit about what they were told about me being sick, about Jennifer having POA, about the pressure to close fast. He said the realtor was suddenly unavailable, which meant the realtor had a lawyer now. Then David said, "There's something else." His voice was careful. He said while looking into the building ownership, his office found a public record hit tied to Michael Garcia's name, a lien notice, a lawsuit, something financial. He said it wasn't fully clear yet, but it looked like Michael had been using Jennifer's assets to secure loans. He said, "This might not just be your daughter's greed. This might be her husband's debt." I closed my eyes and felt that cold clarity settle in. It's always worse than they admit. David said he'd pull more records and run a deeper check. He said he'd keep it discreet. He said the bank paperwork might reveal whether Jennifer's signature was on anything she didn't understand. I asked him what that meant for me. He said it could mean someone tried to tie me to a debt through fraudulent documents, especially if that POA was used widely. My stomach turned. You ever get that moment where you realize you weren't just betrayed, you were targeted? That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Robert's envelope open again, and I made a list of every account I needed to lock down. I called my bank and asked them to add extra verification. I changed passwords. I froze my credit. I wrote down the confirmation number the credit bureau gave me and taped it inside my cabinet door. No more free access. No more help. The last thing I did before bed was open the PDF of that POA document one more time and zoom in on the notary stamp. I wrote the notary's name on a sticky note. I wrote the commission number. I wrote the address. Then I searched the address. It was a strip mall off Hillsborough Avenue, the kind with a check cashing place, a nail salon, and a shipping store. The kind of place you can walk into and get anything stamped if you know the right person. My hands clenched. So yeah, I wasn't just unwinding a bad sale. I was staring at a whole system Jennifer used to move around me. She didn't just lie to buyers. She didn't just sell my property. She built paperwork to make it look legal. Fraud wears nice clothes. I set my phone down, turned off the lights, and stood at the window looking out at my quiet Tampa street. Carol's porch light glowed across the way. Cars rolled by like nothing in the world was wrong. But my world wasn't quiet anymore. David's email dinged at 11:03 p.m. Subject line: Urgent new record found. I opened it and saw one sentence before the attachment even loaded. Michael may have pledged the apartment building as collateral. My throat went tight. That building is mine. Cut to black. Hold on to that thought. Okay? The second David Peterson told me Michael Garcia might have pledged my daughter's building as collateral, I stopped being patient. And if you've ever been played by your own blood, you know exactly why. This is where the quiet planning turns into the first hit. I didn't sleep much after that email. I laid there in my Tampa bedroom staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click on the slow setting like it always did, and I kept thinking about that 20-story building with Jennifer's address on it. My building, my name on the ownership line. And somewhere out there, Michael may have been walking into a bank with paperwork, pretending he owned air. Give me a break. At 6:47 a.m., David called me before I'd even poured coffee. He sounded like he was already mid-fire. He said he'd pulled a public notice tied to Michael's name, one of those filings that doesn't tell you everything, but tells you enough. It mentioned security interest and collateral, and an address that matched the apartment building. David said, "This doesn't mean the bank has a valid claim. It means he tried." I asked him what that meant for me in plain English. David said, in plain English, "It means we need control locked down today." So we moved. By 9:15 a.m., I was in his downtown office again, sitting under those two bright conference room lights while he slid a stack of corporate documents across the table. He'd already prepared the paperwork to change registered agent contact info, update banking authority for the property holding company, and shift building management into a new contract, my contract. He tapped one page with his pen and said, "Once you sign this, building operations answer to you. Not Jennifer, not Michael, you." I didn't hesitate. My hand didn't shake this time. Control isn't loud. We signed and notarized what needed notarizing, legit notary, real ID, clean record. David's assistant made copies, stamped them, and fed them into a folder thicker than a phone book. It felt ridiculous that my whole life could be handled in paper stacks, but that's how it works. The people who hide behind paperwork are the same people who get buried by it. I left with a copy in my purse and a second copy locked in David's office safe. And then the next move was personal. The truck. Robert's truck wasn't just transportation. It was him. The worn steering wheel. The dent near the tailgate from the time he backed into our trash cans on accident and laughed so hard he had tears in his eyes. Jennifer sold it like it was a couch on Craigslist, and that alone could have made me see red for months. David had been working quietly on that too, and he finally had something solid. He told me the title transfer showed a buyer name and an address in Plant City. Not a dealership, a person. Which meant it could be recovered a whole lot faster if the sale was tied to that fake power of attorney document. He said, "I made a call. The buyer is willing to cooperate if he gets reimbursed for what he paid." I asked how much. David said, $7,000. $7,000 to buy back my husband's memory. You're going to have an opinion on that. I know you are. Would you pay it just to get it back? Or would you go scorched earth and make the buyer fight you? Because for me, it wasn't even a debate. I didn't want a drawn-out DMV circus. I wanted my truck back in my driveway, where it belonged. So I authorized it. Not today. 2 days later, David called me and said, "It's back." He didn't mean legally back on paper only. He meant physically back. He meant it was sitting at a mechanic's lot off Hillsborough Avenue, where the buyer agreed to meet and sign title paperwork with David's staff present. I drove there myself, hands tight on the wheel of my little sedan, heart hammering like I was heading into a hostage exchange. When I pulled into the lot, I saw it immediately. Robert's truck, same faded paint, same crack in the right taillight, same little Go Bucks sticker peeling at the corner. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. The buyer was a man in his 30s, baseball cap, work boots, the type who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He kept glancing at David's assistant like he expected cuffs to come out. I didn't blame him. He got caught in the middle of someone else's mess. He said, "Ma'am, I swear I didn't know." I believed he didn't know. He also still took advantage of a grieving widow's paperwork. People see what they want to see when a deal looks easy. David's assistant kept it professional. Signed forms, copies, a check, a receipt printed on letterhead, and then she handed me the keys. When I sat in that driver's seat, the smell hit me old coffee, sun-warmed vinyl, and that faint cologne Robert wore even when he was just running errands. I gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead until the emotion backed off enough for me to breathe. They didn't get to take everything. I drove that truck home slow, like I didn't trust the universe not to snatch it again. Now, here's where things get colder. While I was getting sentimental, David was tightening the trap. Once the building management was switched under my authority, we scheduled a meeting with the property management company that had been handling things under Jennifer's direction. Turns out, Jennifer had been playing landlord in her own head, emailing maintenance requests like she was the owner, throwing weight around with staff like she paid their checks. David set the meeting in a bland office near downtown, with gray carpet and cheap framed art. A manager sat across from me and kept calling me Miss Miller with a nervous smile because he'd seen the documents. He knew he'd been dealing with the wrong person. David said, "From this point forward, you take instructions from Susan Miller only." The manager nodded a little too fast and said, "Understood." Jennifer's little fantasy was over. And that's when we moved into the first real strike. The eviction notice. Look, people hear eviction and think it's some dramatic scene with furniture on the curb. In reality, it starts as paper, letterhead, a date, a deadline, service confirmation. The kind of thing that makes your stomach drop when you read it alone in a quiet apartment. David drafted it clean and simple. Asterisk, asterisk, 30 days to vacate. Asterisk, asterisk, due to change in ownership and lease termination for unit occupancy. It cited Florida statute language in a way that made it look boring. Boring is powerful. Boring is unstoppable. He asked me if I wanted it served immediately. I said, no, because timing is everything. Jennifer was still out of the country, at least that's what she'd claimed. David's office couldn't verify it yet. But her phone location and flight info weren't something we could just grab legally without crossing lines. Still, we knew she'd left, and we knew she'd come back eventually. And I wanted that paper in her hand when she stepped back onto American soil, thinking she could stroll into her life like nothing happened. Welcome home 30 days. If you're thinking that's cruel, I get it. And if you're thinking it's deserved, I get that too. Some people will say I went too far. I say I didn't go far enough. David didn't argue. He just asked, "How do you want service handled?" That's when we used the building's doorman. My building had a front desk, staff-friendly, professional, and strict about procedure. David arranged for a process server to deliver the notice to the building, and the doorman would confirm receipt for the unit. Clean chain, no drama in the lobby, just facts. And we held it. While we waited, the neighborhood started buzzing. Carol Thompson brought over banana bread one day and said she'd heard Jennifer was living her best life overseas. Carol said it with a little laugh like it was cute. You know that look people give you when they're lying straight to your face? Carol had that same look. Like she knew something was off, but didn't want to admit it. She kept asking if I'd heard from Jennifer, if Jennifer was taking care of me, if I needed rides. I kept the mask on. I said, she checks in. Technically, she did. Just not like a daughter should. In the middle of all that, a different neighbor, asterisk, asterisk, Nancy Rivera, asterisk, asterisk, who lives 2 doors down and hears everything caught me coming back from the grocery store. Nancy is sweet but nosy, the kind of woman who stands outside watering plants while absorbing the whole street's business. She said, "Susan, I saw your truck. I thought Jennifer sold it." I paused for half a second, then smiled. Must have been a misunderstanding. Nancy's eyes got wide. She didn't push. But I watched her walk back to her porch with her phone already in her hand. Let them talk. It keeps people distracted. 2 days after that, Nancy knocked on my door at 7:30 p.m. with that breathless energy people get when they're carrying gossip like it's a pot of boiling water. She said, "Don't be mad, but I heard something at my cousin's bank. I told her to come in." Nancy said her cousin worked at a branch downtown, and there'd been internal chatter about a man trying to use an apartment building as collateral paperwork being questioned, supervisors involved, investigation thrown around. She didn't say Michael's name at first. She danced around it like she was afraid of being wrong. Then she said, "It's your son-in-law." That's when my skin went cold. Nancy didn't have proof, but she had enough detail to match what David found. Branch location, timeline, the way the bank folks were reacting. Banks don't get nervous unless money is real. Nancy looked at me like she expected tears. She got calm. I thanked her. I told her she might have just saved me a huge headache, and I asked her to keep it quiet. Nancy promised she would, which in Nancy language means she'd keep it quiet from some people and tell others in whispers over the fence. Fine. Whisper all you want. The paperwork was already moving. That same night, I forwarded David a text. Neighbor confirms bank investigating Michael collateral attempt. Heads up. He responded 1 minute later. Understood. We proceed. The next morning, David called me at 2 a.m. Again. His voice was different. Tight. Focused. Like something finally snapped into place. He said, Jennifer has re-entered the U.S. I sat up in bed so fast my sheets twisted around my legs. David said his office got notice because one of the building vendors had received a frantic email from Jennifer overnight. Something about needing urgent access to management accounts and records. She was back, and she was already trying to grab control again. But here was the twist. David said, she's alone. No Michael. No business trip partner. No supportive husband. Jennifer came back without him, and that detail mattered more than anything else. Because when a man like Michael disappears, he doesn't disappear quietly. He disappears with money. Now it was time. David set service for that afternoon. The process server met the doorman at the front desk with an envelope and a service form. The doorman signed for delivery to Jennifer's unit, time-stamped at 2:14 p.m. David emailed me the confirmation, PDF, signature, and the building's official stamp. Paper beats excuses. I didn't go to the building. I didn't need to. The whole point was for Jennifer to feel the floor drop while I stayed out of sight. I wanted her alone with her choices. About 10 minutes after service, my phone rang. Jennifer. I stared at her name until the screen dimmed and lit up again. Then I answered. Because this was the moment I'd been waiting for. She didn't start with, "Hi, Mom." She started with panic. She said, "What is this? Why did I get an eviction notice?" I kept my voice low. "What notice?" She made a sound like she wanted to scream but didn't have the strength. She said, 30 days. "Mom, what is happening?" I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her feel it. Then I said, "Maybe you should talk to a lawyer." Her voice cracked. "Are you doing this to me? After everything?" After everything. That phrase right there? That's the moment you realize a person has rewritten the story in their head, where they're the victim and you're the villain. I asked her, "Where's Michael?" She went quiet. I heard breathing. Then she said, "He left me." Just like that. Simple, flat. No drama in the words, but a whole disaster behind them. Jennifer said they'd gone to Europe for business, and within days, the story changed. She said Michael kept disappearing. She said he'd been texting constantly, smiling at his phone like a teenager. She said she asked who it was, and he told her she was paranoid. Classic. Then she said she walked into their hotel lobby and saw him with a younger woman hand on her back, like he owned her. Jennifer said she confronted him, and he looked at her like she was an inconvenience. She said Michael told her, "I'm done. Figure it out." And he walked out. I didn't say anything for a second, because even with all my anger, that kind of humiliation hits a person in a raw spot. Jennifer didn't just betray me. She also got played by her husband, and she was calling me from that wreckage. And I'll admit it, my feelings were ugly and complicated. Jennifer started crying and talking fast. She said her cards stopped working. She said she couldn't access certain accounts. She said she borrowed money to get a flight home. She said she had nowhere to go, and now she had an eviction notice. She asked, "Mom, please, I need help." Eeks, if you were sitting across from me, you'd see the way my hands curled into fists on my kitchen table, because here's what she still didn't say. She didn't say sorry for selling my house. She didn't say sorry for the truck. She didn't say sorry for lying that I was sick. She just wanted a lifeline. I told her, "I'm at home." Jennifer said, "Can I come over?" I didn't answer right away. I made her wait. Not to be cruel, to make her sit in the reality that she'd burned the bridge and now she needed permission to step on the ashes. Then I said, "Come tonight, 7 o'clock." Her breath hitched. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet." After we hung up, I called David. He didn't sound surprised. He said, "This is the flip." He asked if I wanted the eviction process to continue. I said yes, because the notice wasn't about putting her on the street that day. It was about breaking the illusion that she could do whatever she wanted and still land soft. David said, "We'll keep it active. We'll watch her moves." Then he told me one more thing that made my pulse jump. He said his office received an email from a bank investigator requesting documents related to the building's ownership because a loan file had inconsistencies. David said they weren't accusing me of anything yet, but they were verifying the collateral claim Michael tried to push. He said, "This is where it gets serious." This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was financial fraud with institutions that don't care about tears. That's when I did something I hadn't planned on doing yet. I called my bank and asked for a fraud specialist. I gave them the POA filing information, told them I believed my identity was used without permission, and asked them to flag my accounts for unusual activity. They gave me a reference number and told me someone would call me back within 48 hours. I wrote the reference number on a sticky note and slapped it inside my cabinet. No more surprises. At 6:58 p.m., Robert's truck was sitting in my driveway like a guard dog. I stood in my kitchen and watched the clock tick towards 7. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. You ever wait for someone you love and resent at the same time? It's a weird kind of tension. It makes you want to lock the door and open it at the same time. At 7:06 p.m., a car pulled up. Jennifer stepped out, and I almost didn't recognize her. She looked thinner, tired in a way makeup can't fix. Her clothes were expensive, but wrinkled like she'd slept in them. Her eyes were swollen, and her hair was shoved into a messy clip like she didn't have the energy to care. She walked up my front steps and froze when she saw Robert's truck. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She whispered, "How? How is that here?" I let her stand with that question. Then I opened the door wider. Jennifer stepped inside like she was walking into court. She glanced around like she expected my house to be empty, like she expected her choices to have already erased me. She tried to hug me. I didn't step back, but I didn't hug her tight either. She needed to feel the distance. Jennifer said, "Mom, I messed up." I said, "Start at the beginning." She swallowed hard. She started talking about Michael, about how he convinced her the Europe opportunity would fix everything. She said he told her the only way to take the deal was to show liquid cash fast. She said he promised they'd buy everything back when they returned. I stared at her until she looked away. Then I asked her, "So you sold my beach house?" She flinched. "I thought we could replace it." "Replace it, like it was a couch." I asked, "And my truck?" Jennifer's voice got small. "Michael said it was just a truck." I leaned against the counter and said, "That truck was your father." Jennifer's eyes filled again. She looked down at her hands. She said, "I know." She finally said, "I'm sorry." It wasn't loud. It wasn't pretty, but it landed. I didn't forgive her in that moment. I'm not built like that. But I also didn't throw her out because I'm still her mom. And she was standing in my kitchen with nothing left but fear. And then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face changed instantly, like a switch flipped from shame to panic. She said, "It's the bank." I held my hand out. "Let me see." She hesitated, then turned the screen so I could read the email preview. Subject line, verification request, collateral documentation. It listed the building address, my building. My stomach tightened. Jennifer whispered, "I didn't know he did that." I looked at her and said, "Are you sure?" She didn't answer fast enough. Right then, the doorbell rang. Not a friendly ring, either. Firm. Twice. I walked to the front window and peeked through the blinds. A sheriff's deputy stood on my porch holding a manila envelope. Jennifer's face went white behind me. That's when I knew they weren't done swinging. Cut to black. Stay with me, okay? That sheriff's deputy standing on my porch didn't look angry or dramatic. He looked tired. Like he'd handed 100 bad envelopes to 100 people that day, and mine was just next in line. And, that's the scariest kind of official. Jennifer was behind me in my hallway, frozen with her phone still in her hand. The email about the building was still lit on her screen like a warning flare. Her breathing went shallow. I could feel the panic rolling off her. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch like I wasn't shaking inside. The deputy asked, "Susan Miller?" And I said yes. He held out a manila envelope and said, "You've been served." That's a sentence that changes your heartbeat. I signed his little device with my finger, the same way you sign for a package from Amazon, except this package was a lawsuit. He nodded, said, "Have a good night," and walked back to his patrol car like he didn't just drop a bomb on my front steps. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it for half a second. Jennifer whispered, "What is that?" I didn't open the envelope right away. I looked at her first, because I needed to know whether she was terrified for me or terrified for herself. Her eyes were on the envelope like it was poison. So yeah, that told me plenty. I carried it to the kitchen table, set it down, and opened it slowly. Inside was a stack of papers with a case caption at the top, a court seal, and more bolded words than any normal person should have to read at night. The plaintiff was a private lender I'd never heard of. The respondent was me. And the claim was about an unpaid obligation tied to the apartment building address, my building. The papers said the lender had a security interest and was seeking enforcement. It mentioned a loan amount in the mid-six figures. It referenced documents executed under lawful authority. Lawful authority. That phrase made my stomach turn because it's the exact phrase a liar hides behind when they forge a signature and slap a notary stamp on it. Jennifer sat down like her legs gave out. She pressed her palms against her eyes, then dragged them down her face. And then she did something I'll never forget. She said, "I didn't sign that." I stared at her. "What did you sign, Jennifer?" She shook her head hard, like she could shake the truth loose and drop it on the floor. She said, "Michael had me sign a few things. He said it was for taxes. He said it was for our business plan." I didn't read it like I should have. I held up the packet. "Was your name on these?" She swallowed. "I don't know. That's not an answer. That's a confession with lipstick on it." I called David Peterson right then, even though it was after hours. He picked up on the third ring like he'd been waiting for me. I said, "Sheriff just served me a suit tied to the building." "And way," David sighed once. "Sharp. Email me photos of the first page and any signature pages." I took pictures, close-ups, the kind you'd take if you were sending a friend proof that your life is real. I sent them to him. Then I turned the packet over and looked for the signature page because I needed to see the lie with my own eyes. And there it was, a signature that was supposed to be mine. It wasn't mine. Close, though. Close enough that someone who didn't know me could believe it. The S looked stiff. The last name had a weird angle. Whoever did it tried to mimic me, and that alone made me feel like my skin wanted to crawl off my body. That was it for me. David texted back almost immediately. "This is connected to the POA fraud. Do not speak to lender. We respond through counsel. I'll file emergency notice disputing authority." Then he added, "We need to lock you down further. Credit freeze, banking holds, document everything." End quote. I looked at Jennifer and said, "Did Michael ever have access to our home office, to your dad's files?" Jennifer's eyes flicked away. "He was around. He helped with paperwork." Helped. That word makes me want to throw things. I told Jennifer, "Give me your phone." She hesitated for one long second, and that second told me she still had secrets. But then she handed it over, like she didn't have the strength to fight. I didn't go digging like some teenager. I didn't scroll her photos or her texts with friends. I went straight to what mattered: her email, her bank app, her recent documents folder, the places where paper trails live. Her inbox was a mess: unread emails, marketing junk, flight confirmations, and then something that made my throat tighten. A string of messages labeled loan docs, urgent. They weren't from a bank. They were from a Gmail address with a guy's name and a company logo pasted into the signature like a sticker. The messages had attachments, and the subject lines were all "need signatures as soon as possible." I tapped one attachment and it loaded a PDF preview. The collateral address was my building. Jennifer's hand started shaking as she watched me read. She said, "I didn't know that was what it was." I looked up. "Then why'd you sign?" She snapped. "Because he said if I didn't, we'd lose everything." She said it like she was the victim of her own choices, and that's where my anger got hot. I said, "You already took everything from me." Jennifer flinched. Her mouth opened, then closed. She tried again, softer. "Mom, I'm sorry." I believed she was sorry in that moment, but not sorry enough to undo what she did without consequences. I handed her phone back and said, "You're staying here tonight." Her eyes widened, like she didn't expect mercy. "Thank you." I said, "This isn't mercy. This is supervision. Some folks might think that's harsh. I call it reality." That night, I slept with my purse in my bedroom and the firebox pushed under my bed like I was hiding from burglars. I kept waking up and checking my phone like it owed me answers. Around 2:20 a.m., my bank app sent an alert about an attempted login from a new device. Attempted, not successful. My heart thumped hard enough to hurt. I changed my password again. Then I changed every password that mattered. Then I turned on two-factor authentication like my life depended on it. Because it did. In the morning, Jennifer came into the kitchen in yesterday's clothes, hair pulled up, eyes swollen. She hovered by the counter like she didn't know where to stand in her own childhood home. She asked, "Are you going to call the police?" I didn't answer right away. I poured coffee, I took a sip, and then I said, "If I have to." She nodded slowly, like she deserved it. David called at 9:03 a.m. He said his office was filing an emergency response with the court disputing the lender's claim based on fraud and lack of authority. He told me to forward him any emails or PDFs tied to those loan documents. I did. Then, David said something that made my stomach flip again. He said, "The lender's counsel is pushing hard. They're claiming reliance on a recorded POA." I said, "That POA is forged." David said, "I know, but we have to prove it fast." Fast. That word kept showing up. And here's the ugly truth about fast. When you're a regular person, it costs money. David didn't say that part out loud, but I saw the way the numbers were lining up. Filing fees, notary records, expert signature comparison, court deadlines, all the stuff a liar counts on you not being able to afford. Fraud isn't just theft. It's a stamina test. By noon, I had a list of action items taped to my fridge like it was a grocery list. Call the county clerk about the notary's log. Request the notary's identification record. Ask the bank for fraud review. Pull the building's corporate bank statements. Freeze Jennifer's access to anything tied to me, and keep Jennifer close enough that she couldn't fix things by making them worse. I looked at her and said, "You're going to tell me everything. Every document, every account, every person you dealt with." Jennifer nodded so hard, her hair clip slid. Then she said, "I don't have access to my own money." My eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" She held up her phone and showed me her banking app. The balance was low, real low, like a couple $100. She said her card stopped working overseas, and she assumed it was a travel block, but now she realized Michael had moved money out. She said he had the logins. He had the control. She said, "I'm broke. You want to know something?" That should have made me feel satisfied. Instead, it made me tired. Because broke people do desperate things, and Jennifer had a history of desperate decisions. I told her, "You're not touching my accounts." Jennifer said, "I wasn't asking." She was lying. Not fully, but enough. I set a rule that day, and I said it like a judge. You stay here. You don't go to the building. You don't contact the lender. You don't contact Michael. You don't sign anything without David reading it first. And you don't try to sweet talk your way out of what you did. End quote. Jennifer whispered. Okay, I added. You're getting a job. That made her look up fast, like I'd slapped her. I wasn't playing. I told her the truth. You're not living off me. You don't get to steal, cry, and then rest. Her cheeks went red. She muttered, I'll figure it out. I said, good. Figure it out at Walmart if you have to. Some people only learn when the floor drops. The next few days were pure chaos. The quiet kind. Not screaming chaos. Paperwork chaos. Calls, emails, hold music, reference numbers written on sticky notes, and the constant feeling that something else was about to break. David got the notary information and sent an investigator to that strip mall office on Hillsborough Avenue. The investigator's report came back with a simple, ugly detail. The notary's log for the day the POA was supposedly signed had gaps. Missing ID copy, missing thumbprint record, no camera footage saved. Convenient. David said, this supports fraud, but it doesn't prove the forger yet. Yet. Another word I hated. Jennifer spent those days on my couch, calling places for work, applying online, and looking at her phone like it was a haunted object. She'd start to text Michael and then delete it. She'd open his contact and then lock her screen. Over and over. I asked her once, do you want him back? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, I want my life back. I wanted mine back too. On Thursday, Jennifer got a job, not glamorous, a hostess position at a chain restaurant near the mall. She came home with a black apron and a forced smile and said, they hired me. I said, good. She asked if I was proud of her. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said, keep showing up. That's what you do when you're rebuilding. That same night, David emailed me an update about the building. He'd contacted the lender's attorney and demanded a full document production, every signature page, every email, every communication proving authority. The lender pushed back, but David pushed harder. He cited fraud. He cited contested authority. He cited my recorded ownership. And he attached the affidavit from the beach house buyers about Jennifer, claiming I was sick and she had POA. Receipts multiply when you keep your mouth shut long enough. Friday morning, I took Jennifer with me to the bank. I wanted her sitting beside me when I talked to the fraud specialist, because I wanted her to hear what adult consequences sound like. We sat at a desk with a woman named Tracy Collins, who had a tight ponytail and the expression of someone who'd seen every scam on the planet. Tracy asked me to explain the situation. I kept it clean. Husband died, daughter filed a fraudulent POA, property sold, lender suit served, unauthorized signatures. Tracy didn't gasp. She didn't pity me. She typed. Then she asked, do you suspect identity theft involving your social security number? That question made Jennifer's head snap up. I said yes. Tracy handed me forms. She gave me a case number. She told me to file a police report to strengthen the fraud claim and protect my liability. Police report. That's when it moved from family betrayal to criminal territory in a way you can't walk back. Jennifer's hand started shaking under the desk. She whispered, Mom. I looked at her and said quietly, you did this. The bank gave us printed account statements for the corporate account tied to the building. That's where I saw something that made my throat tighten again. There were small withdrawals over months, $500 here, $800 there, stuff that looked like maintenance or vendor reimbursements. Except the vendor names didn't match any vendors on the management list. Drip theft, Tracy said. That's classic. They keep it small so you don't notice. I notice now. On the way out of the bank, Jennifer asked if she could stop by her apartment to get clothes. She said she didn't have enough. She said she needed work shoes and her makeup and her winter coat, like Tampa winters are Arctic. I said no. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Mom, I can't wear this same outfit to work every day. I said, you can buy clothes at Target like everyone else. She got angry then. Real anger. She said I was punishing her too hard. She said she'd already lost Michael. She said she was trying. She said I was being cruel. And that's when I said something that shut her up. I said, you sold my home while I was at the doctor. Jennifer's mouth closed. Her face went pale. She looked out toward the parking lot like she needed space from my words. I added, I don't owe you comfort right now. Hard? Yes. True? Also, yes. That night, Jennifer came home from work with sore feet and a crumpled $43 in cash tips. She placed it on my kitchen counter like a peace offering. She said she wanted to contribute. I slid it back to her and said, save it. You're going to need it. She blinked fast, trying not to cry. Then she nodded and shoved it into her purse. It was the first time I saw humility without a performance. Then something shifted. Saturday morning, I was cleaning out the hall closet, mostly because my brain couldn't sit still when Jennifer's old duffel bag slid off the shelf. It hit the floor with a dull clunk that didn't sound like clothes. I froze. You know when an object makes the wrong noise and your body reacts before your brain does? I unzipped the duffel bag and saw a little velvet jewelry pouch, a tangled charger cord, and a small metal key on a cheap plastic tag. The tag had a bank name printed on it and a box number written in marker. A safety deposit key. My fingers tightened around it. I turned and called, Jennifer! She came down the hall, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She saw the key in my hand, and her face drained of color. I said, what is this? She swallowed hard. It's Michael's. I stared at her. Why is it in your bag? She looked down. Because I took it. My pulse thumped hard. From where? Jennifer whispered. From our apartment. He kept it in a drawer. He told me never to touch it. I held up the key. What's in the box? She shook her head. I don't know. That's when I realized something. Michael didn't just steal money. He didn't just push her into selling my property. He ran on secrets. And secret keepers always stash the real story somewhere physical. A box, a key, a number. I sat down at my kitchen table and set the key right in the middle like evidence. Jennifer sat across from me, shoulders curled inward like she was bracing for impact. I asked her, did you ever go to the bank with him? She hesitated. Then she said, once. He said it was paperwork. I said, did you go inside the vault? She whispered, no, I didn't buy it. Her eyes didn't match the answer. Her mouth said no, but her face said, maybe. So I pushed. Jennifer, did you ever open that box? Her eyes filled, and she nodded once. There it was. She said she did it one time, months ago, when Michael was out. She said she was suspicious and wanted to know if he was hiding something. She said she opened the box and saw folders, loan papers, IDs, maybe passports. She wasn't sure. She said she didn't take anything because she panicked, but she remembered one thing clearly. She said, there was a folder with your name on it. My skin went cold. That was the weapon. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the tile. I grabbed my purse, grabbed the key, and said, we're going to the bank. Jennifer started crying and said, Mom, please, I didn't mean. I cut her off. Save it. We're done guessing. We drove to the bank branch near downtown, the one on the tag. The sun was bright and the traffic was loud, and my hands were steady on the steering wheel in a way that surprised me. Jennifer sat in the passenger seat, twisting her fingers until they looked sore. At the branch, the security guard eyed us like we were trouble. And honestly, we were. The teller took one look at the key tag and said we needed an appointment with the vault manager. I didn't argue. I said, we're dealing with fraud and an active court case. That changed the air. They put us in a small office with a man named Asterisk, Asterisk, Greg Harris, Asterisk, Asterisk, and he asked for ID, asked for names, asked for the box number. Then he asked the question that made Jennifer visibly flinch. He said, "Who's authorized on this box?" I said, "That's what we're here to find out." Greg typed, clicked, stared at his screen, and then his eyebrows lifted like he just found something he didn't expect. He said, "There were 2 authorized names on this box." My stomach tightened. "Who?" Greg looked at me, then looked back at the screen like he was choosing words carefully. He said, "Michael Garcia and Susan Miller." Jennifer made a choking sound beside me. I stared at Greg and said, "I have never been here in my life." Greg nodded slowly, the way people do when they've seen a mess coming, and now it's here. He said, "Then we need to pull access logs and signature cards." He stood up, said he'd be right back, and left us alone in that little office with the hum of fluorescent lights and the weight of what he'd just said. Michael didn't just target my building. He put my name on his box. Jennifer grabbed my arm and whispered, "Mom, I swear I didn't do that." I looked at her and said, "I'm about to find out who did." Greg came back with a clipboard and a printed log sheet. He set it down in front of me and pointed. Dates, times, initials. 2 years of entries, and right near the top was a recent one. The date was the week Jennifer left for business. The initials matched her. I tapped the line with my fingernail. "What is this?" Jennifer stared at it, and her face crumpled. She whispered, "He made me go." And that's when everything changed. Greg Harris slid that access log across the desk, and Jennifer's initials sat there like a fingerprint. And I'm telling you, if you've ever watched your own child get trapped by a liar, you know that sick mix of rage and heartbreak. You'd have felt it too. Jennifer's voice came out thin. "He made me go." I stared at her across that little bank office while Greg pretended not to listen. Jennifer kept her eyes on the table like looking up would make it real. I said, "Made you how?" She swallowed hard. "He said it was just storage. He said it was our safety net." Then he told me to sign where he pointed. Greg cleared his throat and said, "Ma'am, we can pull the signature card. You can request copies of the documents on file, but access to the box itself depends on authorization." I pointed at the screen he'd shown us earlier. "My name is on that box. I never authorized it." Greg nodded, like he'd already decided this was fraud but had to stay in bank language. He said, "Then we treat this as a dispute. I can freeze access pending investigation." End quote. Jennifer's head snapped up. "No." I cut her off. "Yes, that box was a weapon. And I wasn't letting Michael keep swinging it." Greg printed out a request form and had me sign it. Real signature this time. He made a copy of my driver's license. He gave me a case reference number. He told me the vault access would be restricted immediately, and he'd flag internal security. Then he added something that made Jennifer's face go even paler. He said, "There was an access attempt yesterday." Yesterday. I looked at him. "By who?" He checked the screen again. The employee logged it as Michael Garcia. Jennifer made a strangled sound. "He's not even here," Greg said. "That's what it says." So either Michael was back in Tampa and hiding, or someone was pretending to be him. Either way, it meant the box wasn't sitting quietly. It was in motion. And when fraud is in motion, you move faster. David Peterson answered when I called, and I didn't even say hello. I said, "The bank says my name is on Michael's safety deposit box." They froze it. "There was an access attempt yesterday." David went quiet for half a beat, then said, "Good. That's very good." He told me not to leave the bank without copies of the authorization screen and the access log. He told me to get Greg's full name and direct line. And he told me one more thing. He said, "Susan, we're filing the police report today. This is no longer optional. Done." We left the bank and drove straight to the Tampa Police Department non-emergency lobby downtown. Jennifer rode in the passenger seat with her hands clenched in her lap like she was trying to hold herself together with sheer force. She whispered, "Are you really going to do this?" I kept my eyes on the road. "You did it first." That's the line right there. The moment where motherhood and accountability collide. I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't gloating. I was protecting myself. At the station, a front desk officer handed us a clipboard and told us to fill out an incident report. Jennifer stood behind me while I wrote everything down in block letters, like the paper could absorb the shame. Fraudulent power of attorney filed. Unauthorized sale of property. Unauthorized sale of vehicle. Attempted collateral pledge of apartment building. Forged signatures. Notary irregularities. Safety deposit box listing my name without consent. When you write it out like that, it stops sounding like family problems. It sounds like what it is. A crime spree with a smile. An officer named Asterisk Marcus Allen Asterisk brought us into a small interview room. He didn't treat me like a gossip story. He treated me like a case. He asked for dates, times, amounts. He asked what I had in writing. He asked if I could provide screenshots, PDFs, emails. I slid my folder across the table and said, "I keep everything." End quote. Marcus flipped through the papers, eyes narrowing at the forged signature page and the lawsuit packet. He said, "Ma'am, this is serious." I said, "I know." He asked if Jennifer was willing to give a statement. Jennifer looked at me like she was waiting for permission to breathe. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just said, "This is her choice." Jennifer's voice shook. "I'll talk." Marcus recorded her statement. Jennifer admitted she claimed she had POA when she didn't understand what it was. She admitted she sold the beach house and truck under Michael's pressure. She admitted she went to the safety deposit box with Michael and signed things without reading them. She admitted she'd been told to say I was sick to close the sale fast. That last part made Marcus's eyes lift. He said, "You told strangers your mom was sick to sell her house?" Jennifer whispered, "Yes." Marcus didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He just wrote and asked the next question. That's how professionals work. Cold, direct, efficient. By the time we left, we had a case number, and Marcus told us a detective would follow up. He also told me to contact the state attorney's office if needed, because this touched property and financial fraud, and those cases can escalate fast when lenders get involved. Translation: this could get ugly for Michael. Good. Outside the station, Jennifer stood on the sidewalk and looked like she might fold in half. She said, "I'm going to jail, aren't I?" I didn't sugarcoat it. "I don't know, but you're not getting out of this with tears." She nodded, and her shoulders shook once like she was trying not to cry. I said, "Get in the car." On the way home, David called. He'd already filed an emergency notice with the court disputing the lender's claim, and now he had a police report case number to attach. He said, "That changes everything." He said, "Courts don't like collateral fraud, lenders don't like being embarrassed, and judges don't like forged documents." He also said he'd reached out to the lender's counsel and demanded a full production of the original signature pages. Not scans, originals, the kind you can run through handwriting analysis. I asked, "What about the beach house?" David said the deed reversal had been recorded that morning. The buyers were getting their refund, and the county had updated the record. The house was back in my name, just like that. You don't always get a win that clean, and I didn't even celebrate. I just felt this heavy relief, like a belt loosening around my ribs. Jennifer didn't cheer either. She stared out the window and whispered, "I really did it." Yes, you did. Back at home, I locked my firebox again and put my folder of receipts on the top shelf of my closet where Jennifer couldn't accidentally touch it. Then I sat her down at my kitchen table like she was 16 again, and I'd caught her sneaking out. I said, "You're going to give David every email and attachment Michael ever sent. Every bank login you know, every account name, everything." Jennifer nodded. "Okay." April. I said, "and you're not leaving this house without telling me where you're going." She flinched. "You can't control me." I leaned forward. "Watch me." That sounds harsh, but here's the truth. Jennifer had proven she couldn't be trusted alone with panic. And panic was all she had left. The next day was a blur of recovery steps. David had me sign a sworn affidavit stating I never authorized that POA and never signed those loan documents. He had me provide sample signatures from my bank records and old mortgage paperwork. He arranged for a handwriting expert to compare them to the forged pages. I spent an hour at my bank verifying corporate account access for the building, confirming management changes, and issuing written notice that Jennifer and Michael were not authorized agents. The bank rep printed the confirmation. I scanned it. I forwarded it to David. Paper stacks beat sob stories. Meanwhile, Jennifer went to work. She came home with greasy hair from the restaurant kitchen smell and $20-something in tips. She dropped the cash on the counter, wiped her eyes, and said, "I'm trying." I said, "Try harder." She didn't argue. She just went to the shower and cried loud enough that I could hear it through the hallway. I didn't go comfort her. Not yet. 2 days later, Detective Sharon Lewis called me. She asked me to come in with all records, including the bank log about the safety deposit box. She asked if David could send over the lawsuit packet and forged signature pages. I told her yes. At the station, Sharon looked through everything with the calm focus of a woman who does not get emotionally manipulated for a living. She asked me if I was willing to press charges if the evidence supported it. I said, "Against Michael." "Absolutely." She asked about Jennifer. That's the question that keeps people up at night. I told her the truth. I wanted restitution and accountability. I didn't want to destroy my daughter if there was a legal way to hold her responsible without throwing her into a cage with strangers. Sharon nodded like she understood that line because she probably sees it every week. She said, "Sometimes cooperation matters. Sometimes it doesn't. We'll follow evidence." Fair enough. Then Sharon gave me a detail I hadn't known yet. She said the notary tied to the POA had prior complaints. Not convictions, complaints. She said that didn't prove anything, but it gave them a direction. Direction matters. On Friday, the lender's attorney made a move. They requested a hearing date to push enforcement and pressure me into settling. David didn't flinch. He told them we'd be there with a police report, an affidavit, and an expert witness. He said, "They're counting on you to fold." I said, "They don't know me." My calm scared even me sometimes. The hearing was set for Tuesday morning at the courthouse downtown. Jennifer asked if she could come. I said, yes. If she was going to rebuild anything with me, she needed to watch what she almost did to me. She needed to see consequences in real time. Tuesday came humid and bright, the kind of Florida morning where the air sticks to your skin. We parked in the courthouse garage and walked through security. The metal detector beeped at Jennifer's belt, and she jumped like she was already guilty. David met us in the hallway with a legal pad in hand. He looked crisp and calm, and I could have hugged him for that alone. He said, "We're ready." Inside the courtroom, the lender's attorney sat at a table with a smug face that made my teeth grind. He had the posture of someone used to winning by intimidation. He glanced at me once, then looked away like I was a nuisance. He didn't recognize me. That's the best kind of advantage. When the judge came in, everyone stood. We sat. The judge Honorable Rebecca Carter had silver hair pulled back tight and eyes that looked like they could slice through nonsense. The lender's attorney started talking about lawful authority and reliance and executed documents. He used my building like a prop, like it was already his. Then David stood up. David didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform. He laid out facts like bricks. He submitted my sworn affidavit. He submitted the police report case number. He submitted the county record showing the POA was disputed and under investigation. He submitted the handwriting expert's preliminary opinion stating the signature did not match known samples. Then he did the thing that made the lender's attorney physically shift in his seat. David submitted the bank's safety deposit box authorization record, listing my name added without consent, along with an access attempt logged under Michael's name after Michael supposedly left the country. Judge Carter leaned forward. Counsel, are you asserting your client has a valid security interest based on signatures now alleged to be forged? The lender's attorney tried to pivot. Your Honor, my client relied on a recorded power of attorney. Judge Carter cut him off. Recorded does not mean legitimate. Thank you. She turned to David. Miss Miller is disputing the POA and the signatures. There is an active police report. Why would I enforce collateral under those conditions? David said, You shouldn't, Your Honor. Judge Carter's lips pressed into a line. Agreed. She granted a temporary stay on enforcement and ordered the lender to produce original documents for inspection. She also ordered both parties to cooperate with the investigation into fraud. She didn't yell, but the message landed like a gavel to the ribs. No one was taking my building without proving clean paper. The lender's attorney looked furious. Good. Outside the courtroom, Jennifer leaned against the wall like her knees were failing her. She whispered, I almost lost your building. I looked at her and said, You almost put me on the street. She started crying. Silent tears this time, the kind that aren't for show. David pulled me aside and said quietly, We just turned the tide. Then he added, and Sharon called. They located Michael. That made my blood go cold and hot at the same time. David said Michael had been flagged on a traffic stop in Clearwater, wrong turn signal, routine stop, and then his name popped up tied to a fraud investigation. He wasn't arrested on the spot, but he was identified, and now they knew he was back in Florida. Sharon wanted to move fast before he ran again. I asked, Does he know we're on to him? David said, He's about to. That afternoon, Sharon called me herself. She said they needed one more thing to make the case tighter. Whatever was inside that safety deposit box, because she believed it contained forged ID copies, signature cards, and loan files. She said banks don't open boxes without proper process, but now that my name was on it and access was frozen, we could work through legal channels to inspect contents. David arranged an emergency motion. Judge Carter signed an order allowing a supervised inventory with bank security, my attorney present, and law enforcement observing. 3 days later, we walked back into that same bank branch, and Greg Harris looked like he hadn't slept. He led us to the vault area through a secured door. Fluorescent lights, thick metal, quiet, that feels expensive. Sharon stood there with a clipboard. David stood beside me. Jennifer stood behind me, pale as paper. Greg unlocked the box and slid it out like it was radioactive. Then he opened it. Inside were folders, thick ones. And the first folder on top had a printed label that made Jennifer gasp. Susan Miller, my name. In Michael's little secret box, Sharon put on gloves and flipped through it carefully. Inside were copies of my driver's license, old utility bills, and a page that looked like a practice sheet of my signature over and over, like someone had been training their hand to become mine. My stomach turned. Then Sharon pulled out another folder, Power of Attorney. Inside were drafts, multiple versions, different dates, different notary stamps scanned in, a handwritten note on the back of one page that said, Use Hillsborough Notary. So Michael didn't just forge one document. He tested options. He ran a whole playbook. And then Sharon pulled out the folder that made the room go dead quiet. Loan package building. Inside were the lender docs, the signature pages, and a note in Michael's handwriting listing collateral value, monthly payment, and a line that said, Jennifer will sign if pressured. Jennifer made a choking sound behind me. I turned and looked at her. He wrote that about you. Jennifer covered her mouth. Her eyes squeezed shut. Her shoulders shook. It wasn't acting. It was the moment the last shred of denial burned off. Sharon didn't comfort her. She kept flipping. Then she found the last item. A small envelope with cash and a handwritten IOU note addressed to the notary, an amount, a date, and thanks. Salt in the wound. Michael didn't just trick my daughter and forge my name. He paid someone to grease the wheels. Sharon sealed everything in evidence bags right there. She had Greg sign a chain of custody form. She handed me a copy. She handed David a copy. And she looked me straight in the eye. She said, "Ma'am, we have enough." That's when I finally felt something like relief. Not peace yet, but the beginning of peace. 2 days later, Michael Garcia was arrested. Not in some dramatic chase, not in some movie scene. In a grocery store parking lot in Clearwater, caught on a camera, walking out with a plastic bag and his phone in his hand, when 2 officers stepped up and said his name. Sharon told me he tried to act confused. He tried to play calm. Then they showed him the warrant, and his face changed. Denial to panic in half a second. Jennifer saw the arrest photo online before I did. She was sitting on my couch after work, scrolling, when she gasped and shoved her phone at me. Michael's mugshot stared back. Messy hair, jaw tight, eyes cold. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just said, "Good." The consequences didn't stop there. The lender backed off fast once law enforcement got involved and original documents were ordered produced. David negotiated a full withdrawal of their enforcement attempt with prejudice pending investigation, meaning they couldn't just come back later with the same nonsense. The lawsuit that had been dropped on my porch like a weapon got neutralized in court. The beach house title was cleanly restored, and the county record reflected it. David also helped me file a civil action to recover damages related to the attempted fraudulent sale and related costs. And then came the part Jennifer didn't expect. Her eviction notice stayed active. She thought the moment Michael got arrested, everything would soften, and I'd let her slide back into her condo like nothing happened. She started hinting. She started asking if she could just go grab some things and maybe stay there a few nights. I said no. She argued once, and I cut her off. "You don't get rewarded for finally stopping the bleeding you caused." Jennifer cried. She got angry. She got quiet. Then she did something that shocked me. She got practical. She asked David if there was a way to avoid criminal charges for her if she cooperated fully and repaid what she took. David said cooperation matters. He said restitution matters. He said she needed her own attorney, and he gave her a referral. Jennifer got a public defender consult first, because she didn't have money. Then she got a cheap attorney through a payment plan. She started selling her jewelry, not the sentimental stuff, the flash stuff Michael bought her. She took it to a pawn shop off Nebraska Avenue and came home with a folded receipt and 1,000-yard stare. She said, "I sold my diamond earrings." I said, "That's a start." End quote. She got a small studio apartment in a rougher area. Not because I wanted her punished forever, but because she needed to learn what real life costs without stealing it from me. She moved out with 2 suitcases and a laundry basket of clothes. And yes, she cried when she closed my front door behind her. I didn't chase her. I wasn't her safety net anymore. I was her boundary. The salt moment came a week later. Jennifer had to go to my building, not to live there, but to sign paperwork at the management office, because her lease termination and move-out process had to be documented. David arranged it so everything was official, clean, and humiliating in the most legal way possible. Jennifer walked into that lobby in work shoes and a cheap cardigan, and the doorman, same guy she used to boss around, smiled politely and handed her a clipboard. She signed. She handed it back, and the doorman said, loud enough for the people sitting in the lobby to hear, "Thank you, Miss Garcia. Miss Miller appreciates your cooperation." People looked up. Jennifer's face turned red like a stove burner. That was the moment she understood. This wasn't her world anymore. As for me, I finally told Jennifer the last truth Robert left me in that envelope. One evening, a month after Michael's arrest, Jennifer met me at a small diner near my house, one of those places with bottomless coffee and sticky menus. She looked older. Not in years, in lessons. She said, "Mom, why didn't Dad ever tell me about the building?" I kept my voice calm. "Because he didn't trust you with it." Jennifer's eyes watered. He didn't trust me? I took a sip of coffee and said, he loved you, but he saw your choices. Then I slid a copy of the deed across the table. Not the building deed, the corporate transfer document, the one that showed Robert had set everything to transfer to me directly, with safeguards, because he knew grief makes people sloppy and greed makes people cruel. Jennifer stared at it like it was a verdict. She whispered, I thought you only had that beach house. I said, that's why you tried to sell it. Jennifer looked down at her hands and said, I really am my own worst enemy. I didn't argue. Over the next months, the consequences kept hitting like dominoes. Michael's charges stacked. Fraud, forgery, attempted grand theft tied to real property, and conspiracy elements that made his bond conditions strict. He couldn't contact Jennifer. He couldn't come near my building. He couldn't touch anything tied to me without getting arrested again. His friends vanished. His business partners vanished. His image collapsed. Jennifer filed for divorce. She didn't do it dramatically. She did it like a tired woman with a new backbone. She brought the papers to her attorney. She signed. She walked out into the Florida heat and breathed like she'd been underwater for years. And me? I took my life back in boring, powerful ways. I rehired building management under my name and started getting monthly reports with real vendor lists and real maintenance invoices. I visited the beach house and replaced the wind chime Jennifer had left behind like a trophy. I drove Robert's truck on Sunday mornings just to feel normal again. I also changed my will, not out of spite, out of clarity. Jennifer is still my daughter. I still love her. But love doesn't mean access. Here's the cold truth you learn. Too late sometimes. People can love you and still try to use you. So I built a wall with paperwork, boundaries, and receipts. One afternoon, Jennifer stopped by my house with a grocery bag and a quiet face. She said she'd been going to therapy. She said she was paying restitution through a plan her attorney arranged. She said she wanted to earn trust back, not demand it. I listened. I didn't hand her forgiveness like candy. I said, keep doing the work. She nodded. I will. And when she left, I stood in my doorway and watched her drive away in a beat-up used car, the kind she once would have mocked. She didn't look back like she used to. She drove like someone who finally understands consequences. That's growth. Ugly, late growth. But real. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. Don't confuse kindness with permission. Protect yourself first, even from family. I'm not bitter now. I'm clear. If that ending felt good, hit subscribe. I've got more stories like this.